Because that's what's so striking is that China banned Bitcoin, but the equipment is almost universally made in China. So you mentioned that really this mining industry, it's only a few years old.
Yeah.
And there was a real shift that happened when China banned mining. Is that correct? So tell us about the difference between pre-China ban and then how that changed the landscape of mining after that.
So even before the China ban, there was an interesting thing that happened. Bitmain, it was right as the Z15s were coming out. This was right before the China ban, earlier in 2021, I think it was. Bitmain had come out with the Z15. The two owners of Bitmain had a feud. And one of the owners, something happened with the business license and they weren't able to ship anything off of the docks. So that caused a backlog on a lot of miners that were pre-sold into the space. So even before the China ban happened, there was another incident that happened where the miners were actually stuck in China, right? So what ended up happening was that caused a bit of a backlog because this was right before the S19 came out. The Z15 came out. They sat on the docks for, I think, 6 months before they were able to ship them, before they came to a head with the feud between the two owners of Bitmain, and they went their separate ways. After that happened, the S19 came out, and everything was pretty wild. I remember, and it's funny because I feel like a lot of memories are short from that time period because we were all just heads down moving so fast. But I remember there was a statement put out by WhatsMiner at that time because they went from using a power supply that could handle 277 volt to 240 volt. And they had put out a statement saying that they had never made miners for the U.S. market, and 277 volt was a U.S. voltage. And then the China ban happened very shortly after that, and a lot of those miners ended up coming to the U.S., and now they needed a 277 volt miner, but they only had power supplies that could support 240 volt. So there was a mad rush on not only infrastructure and capacity that was ready, but just like miners go up and down with the price of Bitcoin, as the price of Bitcoin had spiked, China banned it, and then transformers, containers, all of the infrastructure, it followed the same path that the Bitcoin miners did. So we went from seeing $40,000 transformers to $120,000 transformers. So this increased the cost of all the infrastructure across the board, and the U.S. just was not ready for it at all.
Because that's what's so striking is that China banned Bitcoin, but the equipment is almost universally made in China.
Yeah, at that time, yeah. And I think there was some manufacturing going on in Malaysia a little bit at the time, which they've moved a lot of it out of there. It was interesting because as all of that equipment flooded the U.S., so did these Chinese companies that were mining as well,
In exile, wanting to stay in the industry.
A lot of them.
And Texas saw a lot of the influx.
Very much so, very much so. And I found that really interesting to watch everybody kind of swing from that, hey, we don't make miners for the American market, to, hey, guess what?
You're the only game in town.
Yeah, we really need to make sure we change our the way that we work with the American market now. And I said WhatsMiner, but this was also true with Bitmain. This is also true with Canaan very heavily. These companies, they cater to a Chinese market, and basically what happened was the North America just kind of caught the overflow of a lot of it for a very long time. Well, whenever all of that mining shut down, that was a lot of miners that were looking for a home. So they shut down old miners, people that were getting 3 and 4 cent power in the wet season, things like that. They took those old miners out of the racks, and then they put them in storage, right? And they were waiting it out, or they were trying to send them to the U.S. Well, what ended up happening was all of those S19s that had just came out, all those E15s, they already had reserved capacity in the U.S. So all of the miners that came offline during the China ban, there's a pretty good chance that a lot of those older miners never came back online from the S15, the S9s, the S17s. they whenever they came out of the racks, they didn't go back online.
Hey, it's Amy. Click over here to subscribe, click over here for more content, and we'll see you next time.